Thank you for finding this room, this little hole in the wall. We thought we'd have a nice little, intimate fireside chat. So it seems appropriate that you have to walk through a little opening to walk into this bigger room. So I'm glad everybody could find us and is here. For those of you who weren't in the last session, my name is Jordan Levitin. I'm the CEO of Levitin Insight Strategy. I'm a marketing researcher with several decades of research, working with companies like yours to understand the market and brand positioning and find ways to create innovation pipelines and positioning strategies. So I'm the market research guy, the question asker in the room. Enough about me. We're here on, I'm on stage with Leanne Nullmeyer, who's Director, Marketing and Brand Experience with IG Wealth Experience. Leanne's a marketer who got her start in the high-tech world, working with things that are not considered high-tech anymore. So that's interesting. And for the last 13 years or so, she's been focusing her time on financial services marketing, where the products don't change as quickly, but the ways in which we engage our audience do. Leanne has an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University and is certified as an Agile product owner. In 2018, she navigated the transformation of a marketing department from what's known as a waterfall process to Agile. And she tells me, as we were preparing for the chat today, that preparing this presentation was actually quite cathartic because in order to share her experience, she's hoping that she'll be able to help others avoid the pain that she had experienced in that transformation. So thank you for taking this on, Leanne. Let's start with a quick question. You put yourself out there as an Agile marketer. Can you explain to me what this means? How has that impacted the way you work?
Sure, and I think agile is one of those words, you hear it thrown around a lot, maybe more so before we just started only talking about AI all the time at conferences. But to some people, agile might just mean, hey, we're fast, we're changing in response to the business. And I would say, it's not necessarily faster to go agile, but it is really an approach that's about being responsive to changing business needs. And agile comes from the software world. So long time ago, some software developers said, hey, why should we do these big releases? We should do smaller, more frequent releases. And that translates well into marketing. So if you've ever been, part of a big campaign build, business priorities shift, you have a bunch of half-built stuff, you can't get it out there, to the market. So to me, that's a quick definition of agile. But what I really like, and we did bring some slides, so we're going to maybe need help from Sam in getting our slides up. But we're going to go to the next one if you can. So this is actually showing the principles of Agile according to the Agile Marketing Institute. No, not yet. We're nothing without our slides. We could wing it. But honestly, I had a personal goal, just as I talked to Sam about my slides. I think the best conferences are when someone brings an action plan and people take like a picture of it. And I worked really hard to make an action plan slide. So I'm so hopeful that I get my slides up here. But anyway, in terms of the Agile marketing definition, it really focuses on 5 key principles. So breaking down hierarchies, focusing on collaboration, a principle of focus where you're often planning your work into short sprints. I know some of you might already do this. Some of you might say, we don't work in sprints, but you're really trying to focus on doing a few less things, getting them done, and then getting them off the shelf. So there's an Agile marketing definition. If you do get a chance to see the slides, you'll find the full definition there. Okay.
I have a printout if you want to have something in your hand.
I'll work with this small view of the slides I have in front of me. It's okay. Good. I'll be agile about it.
Okay. So, it's a broad... Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we're
Great.
That's that slide, folks.
Okay. Do you want anything more you want to say about on this slide? Okay, cool.
Those are the principles.
That's great. So it's a broad mandate. right? And I think the folks in this audience can appreciate that. We're talking about thinking about process in a different way. And what would you say are some of the benefits of working under this methodology?
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about the benefits of the Agile approach, and then specifically like for our kind of financial services industry, where I think it can be really challenging to go full Agile. And the reason is that, all of us in financial services marketing, we have to work with a lot of lawyers, compliance, various stakeholders, and it's not always and probably not usually possible to get them to align their work and their sprints and their timelines to you. But by taking a few pieces of Agile methodology and applying them to probably a pretty typical FI kind of environment, I think there's a few sort of benefits. And the first one I mentioned when I was kind of faking my way through the definition, and I talked about the principle of focus. And for me, that's really the number one thing. I fall short of this all the time because we still do quarterly and annually planning, and it's kind of like you want to kick everything off. You think about that big waterfall you have in front of you. You think about your workfront process, and you want to start all the work. But the principle of Agile is really saying we're going to focus on planning out what we're going to do and what's going to be in our backlog. So having like a visual representation of here's all of our current work and then here's all of our backlog of work. So that was kind of the first kind of benefit.
Yeah, so let's just clarify one thing. I used the word waterfall, you used the word waterfall.
Sure.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so, and I'm sorry if we missed that. The waterfall kind of traditional way of working simply means that we have a series of steps that we have to work through. So maybe a writer works on something first in a Word document. Maybe they then have to put that through a few people for approval, and then maybe it goes into a design format or it goes on a website or something like that, goes through a web publishing process. So waterfall just means one person hands the work to the next person, and then every stage has kind of a timeline associated with it. So with Agile, we would try to get as many people as possible to collaborate in real time on the end product. So that's really the difference there. Yeah. So the principle of focus, what I would say coming out of that, the most tangible thing that's really helped me is having that visual representation of the work broken down to that smallest possible deliverable that it can be and prioritized. And then I think that kind of benefit of Agile leads us into the two other benefits I would pick. One has to do with stakeholders, and the other one has to do with your internal team. So if I think about stakeholders, what's really helped me is being able to show business partners. For me, that's often distribution. In the past, it's also been product marketing, where you can say, hey, here's everything that my team is working on in terms of top priorities, because I already have this view. This is a view that we're literally using every day for our day-to-day work, but I can share it with my stakeholders. And then here's our backlog of work. So when a new request comes at me as a marketing leader, I can say, great, let me put that in my backlog, or let's have a discussion about prioritization. So it's really empowering that way. And that discipline of staying organized and keeping up that visual view of your work has really been key for me in kind of enabling that.
And a backlog, just so we all understand the terms. That means work you're supposed to have done but didn't get to yet.
Backlog simply means the next priorities.
Okay.
Yeah, so just your backlog of work, the things that you would do next. Because you're not starting every single project at once. You're focusing on a few projects and you're keeping a list of what you will do next.
Okay. Now, I mean, that does involve doing things a little differently. Right? Mm-hmm. And there's resistance, I would imagine. Right. So we talked about what are some of the barriers, what are the top reasons why marketing leaders are not adopting an Agile approach. And of course, I'm a market researcher, so I need a bar chart to help me with this.
Ah, we brought you a bar chart. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. And of course, it's way too small for me to see, but I do know that the usual suspects are there.
Yeah.
Right. The things where it's not how we've always done it. It means learning a whole new way of working. I need to have the tools. I need to have the right people. I need to train them properly. So how do we overcome these? What are some of the ways of achieving Agile without going whole hog into it.
And I think that's important, like what I'm imagining without really being able to, spend a lot of time getting to know the people in the room, is that most of us probably have control over, our team or our department, but it's pretty rare that we would be able to transform our whole business. So I think that the way to kind of get some of these benefits is to start kind of with yourself, with your own work, what's in your control. And then, like I said, when I was talking about focus, just sharing that view out with the rest of the business. So if you were to go and learn all about Agile methodology, like how you would change your whole world into sprints, etc., it can feel very overwhelming. I brought one idea here to show, and not to get into any detail, but it really starts to speak to, I think, a tangible way that someone in like a marketing lead kind of position could put some Agile principles into work. And the idea here is actually using your client journey as a backlog. So I talked about, maybe you could create this lovely view of your work, and maybe some of you use like a project management tool, like whether you use Monday or you use one of those kind of things, and that could create your view. But if you're kind of kicking it old school and you don't even have any of those type of softwares that you use right now, you might have some sort of a client journey slide. And if you don't, that I would just really recommend. That's probably another talk. But this is a great example. And it was something that I ended up doing when I was briefing my email agency. I needed them to better understand our business and basic kind of steps in our client journey. So what I did here, and it doesn't matter about the detail on the slide, but you can see we're kind of going through a pretty typical financial services client journey, and we're coding things in terms of green. We've already put the marketing effort around it, and yellow, we haven't done it yet. So I think our previous speaker was talking about, at Sun Life, the top used app was going to be the insurance calculator. Well, that's the one we're going to put green first, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of yellow things in the back of our backlog that go along our client journey. So I find that's a helpful tool, and it can work really well in the organization when you're not going to someone and saying, my team's going Agile and we're here to talk about priorities, but you're just saying, here's my client journey, here's the pieces of the client journey I'm working on now, and the ones in yellow, like let's have a conversation about what we should do next.
So each of these dots that we see on the screen would be a task that has to be done, right? Backlog or future work, you're keeping track of everything.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how this approach helps you prioritize and measure up against outcomes, business outcomes?
Sure. And it's funny because I think this actually happens when you're at conferences. Like you sometimes hear these great ideas that other people are doing. And that's a great, generation of backlog work. So one that I dealt with recently that's pretty simple along the client journey relates to personalization and email. So we have some great data. We have those postal codes. We actually have that Environics tool that you also heard about. So we have opportunities to personalize our emails in wild and wonderful ways if we want to and if we have the time. But it comes down to prioritization. What do we anticipate would be the return for taking on a task like that? And this whole Agile focus and really taking the time to break things down into small pieces involves having that conversation with your team about how much time would it take you guys to do that? Having that conversation with the business, like is there a test we can do where we can get an answer quickly, etc. So I brought another little tool. This is the only other tool I have before I get to this promised action plan. But this is something that I have used in a past life, and I actually used it with business partners. So if I had that example, like we're thinking about doing image personalization on emails, we could actually have some fun with some marketing math to try to calculate a return on effort. And I call it marketing math because it's my kind of math. Like the numbers don't really matter, it's all relative, but it's totally scientific at the same time. So you can see here, it all starts with working with the team, kind of estimating what that effort might be, whether it's low, medium, high, how long it might take to do that task. If you are working in sprints, can we get this done in 2 weeks or not? And then what we think the business value would be. So as long as we kind of code things based on business value consistently, 100 is a high business value, 50 is a medium business value, we can get some kind of a calculation of return on effort. And working in FIs, I don't know if anyone else has ever tried this. I kind of made this up. It works really well with my kind of business partners. So I wanted to share that in case it would help you with any of yours, because we all have those people in our lives, in our work lives, that have these ideas, and all the ideas are great. But when you really help them understand what that trade-off would be of how much time you might have your team spend to get that work done, they can start to see it in a little bit of a new light.
So I can see that this is a great example of discipline and an approach to planning and executing work. And it doesn't have to be a complete upheaval from how we as marketers normally think through our processes. So when we were preparing for this, we talked a little bit about how you can use this with your agency partners, too.
Right.
So can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I think where agency partners have fit in for me personally in my current role is that taking the time to really work with the team to understand what we can do in-house and what the effort will be just makes it easier for me to decide when I do want to bring the agency partners in. And I have, mistakes have been made. I have gone out and with the best of intentions thought, okay, I'm going to carve off a whole piece of the client journey and hand that to the agency because it makes sense on paper. You can get the statement of work. It all makes sense. But when I really dig into breaking down the work into smaller chunks, I start to realize that we can get more done and use our agency more effectively by giving them the projects that either are just more time consuming for us to execute internally, or maybe the agency has done it before, so they just have more of a model to apply. So that's really a focus that I'm trying to take. Specifically for email, we work with an email agency, so we try to have really transparent conversations about, where are we at, where is our work at, and where could some modules from you really help us advance where we're at.
So from what I'm understanding from this then, so Agile is making sure things are happening simultaneously instead of one after the other, keeping track of all of the moving pieces with some sort of system, being transparent and making sure that people are paying attention and are clued in. So I think I get it. This is cool. Our last promise from our outline was to come up with an action plan.
Yes.
So is there something that you can share with us about how you can get the benefits of an agile marketing approach without necessarily rethinking the way we do our work?
Yeah, so this is where I tried to it was good to reflect in preparation for today's talk and think, what are a few things that maybe you're already doing or maybe they're low-hanging fruit, just to try to take the best maybe of both worlds, like if you're like me and you're not working in a full agile environment, and get some of these benefits. So we'll see how I do with this slide. So the first one is make work visual. So that was kind of the first thing I talked about. In any kind of system, just having that backlog and really challenge yourself to think, how can I use that as a tool with business partners and in planning so that I'm not, recreating different slides, different views, but I really have one core view for my whole team that I'm also sharing out internally as we prioritize work. And the second one is about fostering collaboration. And I probably didn't talk about this one enough, but Jordan kind of hit on it. So it's that idea of, let's try to get ourselves out of the world where we have someone like a writer working kind of in a bit of a silo and handing it over to someone on a digital side or something like that, and really allow everyone to focus on building the tactic that we're trying to build together. It can save a lot of time. Again, we don't do Agile just to save time. We also do Agile to improve our output, but really breaking down those barriers. And I think it helps the team because they have so much more visibility into the impact of their work. And the third one is that principle of focus. So I know for me recently, just being able to break projects down into one deliverable and two deliverables instead of one major deliverable. I do have an example this year where we literally launched the first part and priorities shifted and we just are not moving ahead with the second part right now. So I think it does help to be responsive without that feeling of overwhelm, where you're just adding things to the team's plate and then you're not necessarily getting better results. Or I know for us, we can get pretty much anything done that we say that we want to get done. But without the focus, we don't have the time to look back and say, what did we actually learn? Where are our KPIs? Like, I hope I'm not the only one in the room that's been so busy that you just lose track of time to look at your KPIs. So that principle of focus, it is that discipline that helps you to have the data from each piece of work that you take on. So the next one is around breaking down deliverables into MVP, so minimum viable product, minimum lovable product, if that resonates more. But sometimes, we work for big, lovely, wonderful brands. It can be hard to figure out what is the minimally viable piece of work that we can actually put out into the market and get some initial feedback from so that we can decide if we're going to continue. So I think those are really interesting conversations. And MVP is kind of one of those agile terms that people like to throw around. And then the last one, size work and estimate your return on effort. So that was the one slide that I brought about marketing math. But if you haven't created something like that for yourself, like I said, I think it can be a really fun way to engage both your own team and other teams in trying to figure out where should we focus as marketers. So that is the action plan. I'm so glad we got this slide. And thank you to people that took a picture, because that was my personal goal. And I know it was self-fulfilling because I kind of asked for it, but I appreciate that marketing people are so generous. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. And as I'm listening to you, I can really understand the link between the software industry, the technology industry, and what you're showing us today, right? To break things down and get it moving quickly.
Yeah.
Which is, in the ever-changing market we're facing, we have to do that more and more. So that's great. We have about 5 minutes for questions both from the virtual audience, hello in there, and those of you in the room. So questions for Leanne, quite a few. We have a microphone too, so that our virtual folks can hear the questions. It's coming up the side aisle.
Thank you. You mentioned marketing math, but we work for banks. And sometimes marketing math doesn't work with executives, or works for a little bit of time, and they want to know actual, ROI, how many new clients is this going to bring in? When do you integrate that kind of into the process, and how do you limit not going down rabbit holes of spending hours and hours trying to calculate the ROI?
No, good question. And it does not replace KPIs and measurement when the work is done. I think where that marketing math fits in is when you're trying to prioritize the work that you're going to take on for your next test, for your next piece of work, where maybe the ROI is uncertain. So what has worked really well for me kind of in the financial services industry is just keeping it simple. It's like t-shirt sizing, if you've heard of that the IT departments do, okay? So we're just kind of bringing that kind of a lens as marketers. So 100 means it's going to have high impact. If you happen to have real ROI data and you know the ROI tends to be good on an initiative, then let's rate that 100. It's going to be 50 if it's uncertain or medium effort, and 0 if it's something, that's maybe more cosmetic or just has to be done for a compliance reason, right? And then hopefully you can find a way to rate your effort and your anticipated return that just allows you to compare the projects. When I remember in business school, they always have the model of all kinds of decision-making models, and there's management opinions somewhere in the model. Of course, those are always going to trump. Of course, we're always going to deal with those. But this kind of a focus and an effort just helps us to not solely fly based on just the loudest opinion in the room.
There was another question, I think, from the central aisle. There's one right up here towards the front. Thank you.
Hi. I'm just curious of the tools you're using in your department to manage the workflow and support the agile environment.
Yeah, and it's a good question because we are doing some agile tests right now, which have us using multiple tools, and we're going absolutely bonkers. So you'll notice we don't come here from a place of here's exactly what to do, because we're in the middle of trying different things. So we have a Kanban board that is done through Confluence, and that works okay when we're working with more digital people that like to use that solution. But we are, at the end of the day, an Adobe shop. I think we're an Adobe shop that hasn't quite grown up completely to use all of the features. And we use Workfront for like most of our development. So I think our dream world actually is a bit of a consolidation on like what can Workfront, and if anyone knows, please tell me, what can Workfront do for us to stand up maybe something like a Kanban board or a board that easily shows a backlog or something like that, because I think using less tools will be easier. I also know when I did pure on Agile training, which is a while ago now, purists are just going to use sticky notes and chart paper. And that's what we used in the beginning. And it was incredibly frustrating for our business partners because we would have to say, come up to the marketing floor and see our flip chart or take a picture of it for them. So I think some of the tools are really just like, they're the digital equivalent of the sticky note and the chart paper. And that's okay.
Cool. Question in the middle of the room.
It was alluded to in the intro, the role of product owner, I believe the certification. So in a traditional Agile team, the product owner, to my understanding, is the bit of decision maker for the next priorities for the team and the interface with stakeholders. So I'm wondering how that translates into what you've seen for marketing, Agile-like teams, and how that role is evolved or adapted.
No, it's a good question, and it can be a confusing one because Agile product owner is defined as the decision maker on whatever the product is. So if you're the person in your organization that owns the website, then you could be the product owner for the website. It also could get you in trouble with some of your business partner friends who are like, but I am the product director for XYZ product that also appears on the website. So, you do have a lot of that cross-functional. But in that Agile methodology, product owner really is the person that makes that final call on what the team is going to do next. So we engage a lot of stakeholders, but it does imply that the marketer is that decision maker at the end of the day on the prioritizations and the plan.
I think we've run out of time.
I think it's time to let these people have lunch.
It's time to have lunch. So, Leanne, thank you so much for essentially reducing the barriers to being more agile by giving us permission to do it in bits and pieces, not going whole hog. Leanne, will you be around for the rest
I'm here all day.
Great. So if you have questions, we now have our networking lunch. It'd be a great opportunity to follow up with others you've met. The next session's at 1:45, I believe, and then we start track 2 at 2 something. And a special thank you to Stan at the back of the room for working out the slides. Yay.
Thank you.
All right, see you.